Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Saints Row 4 Re-Elected. I played it on the Xbox One, it's also available on the PS4, PC, and I believe the Switch now. So the game starts out with the leader of the Saints, Shondi, and Pierce all somehow wrapped up in a, crazy takedown evil villain kind of thing teamed up with MI6. You guys are on a secret mission to stop Cyrus Temple from nuking the US, and somehow you end up climbing on a nuke while it's flying through the air, disarming it. Once you've done so, you end up falling and landing in the White House, winning the adoration of the United States. Which leads to you being the President of the United States, which is not really that long-lived. I mean, they skip ahead a bit and aliens invade. Those aliens then stick you in a simulation, and that's where the real meat of the game begins. You have to resist the aliens by disrupting this simulation, and you gain superpowers in the process, and it's just kind of seriously wacky shit. There's also DLC that calls back to the DLC that this game was actually based on, called Enter the Dominatrix, and there's the How the Saints Saved Christmas DLC. Which I've gotta say, those are probably two of the greatest DLCs in the history of DLC, just because they are so very Saints Row about everything. And as I've said in the past, the Saints Row games were clearly a GTA clone, and they started to develop their own flavor, and then they truly embraced it in the third game, and the fourth game they just go off the fucking rails with the Saints Row-ness of it. And I'm sure that if you wanted, you could poke a bunch of plot holes and whatnot in the story, but that kind of defeats the point of this game because it's not meant to be taken overly seriously like that. It's really meant to just be enjoyed for what it is, which is kind of batshit insane. And when you take into account that this game almost didn't really get fully made and another studio had to step in and finish it, you gotta go with what was there to begin with. That being said, let's get on to the audio, and the first things first, like any game like this, there are multiple radio stations to listen to, and I gotta say, the one disappointing thing is that there are far fewer radio stations in Saints Row 4, but I will say I found a couple that I enjoyed more so than I did in, say, the previous Saints Row game, which was nice. The other music in the game is very well done, and it always fits what's going on in the game at the time. They do a really good job with that. As for the voiceover work, it is still very well done. There are some really famous names in this, and that's just hilarious because you've got Keith David playing Keith David in this game, which leads to some other greatly wacky moments that I won't get into because why spoil the surprise? Now, as for the sound effects, I like the sound effects that are in the game. There are really good ones to go with all the different wacky weapons that come from an alien invasion and just the guns in general that are in the game. But I will say there are definitely some missing sound effects, and that's a little disappointing, but it is also understandable given the situation of this game. Like I said, this game almost didn't get completed. The only other audio issue I had was during the How the Saints Saved Christmas DLC, because that problem was an audio-video sync issue, and I really only noticed it in the main cutscene at the beginning. The rest of the time I really didn't see it, so it wasn't that big of a deal. Now, as for the gameplay mechanics, once again, this is very much an open world, go do missions, go do side missions, go do other objectives kind of game, but this one gets wacky with it, like I said earlier, because of the superpowers. You get super jump, you get the ability to glide, you can shoot fire, you can stomp and cause things, telekinesis, all sorts of powers. But then you also tie that into previous Saint stuff, like driving around, blowing stuff up with a tank, flying around, blowing stuff up. Then you've got the Genki Bowl things where they actually use the superpowers, there are ones that are completely based around using the superpowers to fight. There's also Mind Over Murder, where you use the telekinesis to throw things through certain goals. They really do use everything in the game very well. I guess one addendum to that would be that they don't do much driving in this game, which they don't make that big of a deal out of. It doesn't really matter as much in this game. Previous ones, obviously, it was a big deal. This time around, not such a big deal because you have superpowers and can run faster than most of the cars. Actually, I'm pretty sure you can run and fly faster than all of the cars. There's also a great selection of weapons ranging from more traditional ones, shotguns, pistols, etc., to guns that are like the Inflato Ray, where you literally inflate enemies until they explode, or the black hole gun, and stuff like that. I just like that they added all that wackiness, and of course they give you a wide selection of weapons, which I always love in games. I will, however, say some of the missions are not designed as well as in the past, so there are the occasional issues I have with them where you feel like you can't do as well as you'd like to. That being said, overall I really enjoyed what they did with what they had. They definitely kept some of the old stuff but made it new with the add-ons like the superpowers. One issue I did have isn't really control related, but it'll sound kind of like it. There are certain weapons that when you're firing and moving, they don't necessarily fire in the direction you're aiming. So I wouldn't really call that a control issue, but it does almost blend into that and could be mistaken for one. But it's also never bad enough that you're like, ah, shit, this is getting me killed, this is ruining this game, so it's not that big of a deal, but it does get to be a little annoying at times. As for the controls, I feel like the controls work for the most part very well in this game. I do feel they're a little touchy when you're using the super sprint, but otherwise I feel like the movement and aiming works very well. I also feel like it's a very responsive control system. I didn't run into any issues where I was struggling to fight the enemies I was trying to fight, and I didn't run into any issues where I felt like the controls screwed me. As for the graphics, one must remember that Saints Row 4 was originally released on the 360 and PS3, so really the re-elected version is just an HD update. It's not really a graphical overhaul, so this game doesn't look as good as an Xbox One or PS4 game could, but it also has a very cartoony look, so that makes it work with the world that it is now in, and it makes it look good still. I mean, they weren't going for hyper-realism back then, so it works even now. Unlike some of the previous Saints game, it's not as colorful when you're in the simulation. The world is very kind of tinted in red, and you kind of change the tint to a more blue as you take over the area. But it's always night, it's a much darker game, it's not as bright and colorful, which is a little disappointing. I really enjoyed that about those games because it wasn't in the brown and gray scale that like all other games were at the time. That being said, I did like the design of everything. I like the aliens, I like the weapons, I just like the way everything in the world does look. But I will say I did run into a couple of issues. Specifically, there were a couple of cutscenes where the facial animations were bad. They didn't look all that good, and it was kind of disappointing and weird. I also ran into a glitch where an enemy got stuck in a wall, so I'm calling this kind of a graphical glitch. But it made it kind of difficult to kill him. I was able to kill him without restarting the mission, but half the time I was shooting, I was hitting the wall. But I was able to get over it and enjoy the game. I just like the look of it because it is kind of wacky and fun, and it fits with the style of game that Saints Row is. So to wrap this up, I think Saints Row 4 is kind of the ultimate Saints Row game. It's definitely the culmination of all the humor they've been trying to build up to, and it's the game where they finally executed all of that. But not only that, they were able to build a ridiculous game around their own ideas, and it's just wacky and fun, and it really is. It's just a fun game. The problem is, nowadays, there are so many games that while you do enjoy playing them, they're not necessarily just fun. This is one of those games that is truly fun. So I fully recommend it. I think the re-elected edition is excellent because it comes with all the DLC, and God, come on. How the Saints Save Christmas, Enter the Dominatrix, they're ridiculous and they're hilarious. So yes, fully recommended. Okay, so in the comments below, since summer is starting to wind down, why don't you tell me what games you're looking forward to in the fall-winter area? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.